Hello, I'm Penny Thompson from the Educational Technology program at Oklahoma State University, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some common myths and controversies in the educational psychology field. I'm going to discuss two popular myths or controversies. One is what is often presented as Dale's cone of retention, and the other is the visual auditory kinesthetic learning styles theory. Then I'm going to highlight some more research-based or theoretically grounded ideas about how people learn. So first we'll start with the cone of retention, which is actually a corruption of a graphic called the cone of experience that was presented by a researcher named Edgar Dale. If you've done any internet searching about teaching and learning, you've probably run across something that looks similar to this. A pyramid or cone with a statement saying that people remember only 10% of what they read, 20% of what they hear, 30% of what they see, and on down to 90% of what they do. But the cone of retention is actually a myth. It is based on the real Edgar Dale's cone of experience, which looked more like this. So Edgar Dale was a professor of education at the University of Ohio from the 20s to 1970, and he studied the educational applications of media. And in 1946, he wrote a textbook where he presented this graphic and used it as an organizing framework for his textbook. So you can see that he has it down at the bottom of the cone, the most concrete types of experience, direct, hands-on, purposeful experiences. And it goes up to slowly more abstract types of experience until he gets to the top, which is reading, verbal symbols, and visual symbols. And again, this was an organizing framework for his textbook. It does not include any numbers, it does not include any percentages, and it was a descriptive idea presented by Dale. He did not claim that there was research or data behind this. So this is the real cone, and the cone of retention is a myth. But the cone of retention actually seems intuitively to make sense. We know, writing something down, often that does help us remember. And that's probably true. But the key is that these numbers and percentages and the implication that some types of activities are better than others that you see on this incorrect cone of retention is not research-based, it's not grounded in theory or evidence, it's just an urban legend, it's just a myth. And if you would like more information on this topic, there was an issue of Educational Technology magazine in 2014 that was devoted to the mythical cone of retention, and it is available in print form at OSU's library. So the next topic I'm going to talk about is the visual auditory kinesthetic learning styles theory, which is a very popular belief, but the evidence behind it is questionable. So the VAC learning styles theory claims that all of us fall into one and only one of these three learning styles categories. Visual learners learn through seeing, think in pictures, and learn through viewing and creating images. Auditory learners learn through listening, think in words, and learn best from lectures. Kinesthetic learners learn through touching and doing, they express themselves through movement, and they learn best through physically interacting with their environment. And the VAC learning styles theory proposes that these are fixed traits. These are just traits that we are born with. We can't change them. We're stuck with them. So what they propose is that teachers should find out the learning styles of all of their students and then tailor their lessons specifically to match those students' learning styles. Now, despite how widely believed and accepted without question this theory often is, in the field of educational psychology, it's controversial at best. There's a lot of criticism about this learning styles theory. Now, no one is really arguing about our preferences. People do have preferences for either pictures or words, or some people have more of a need to move than others. Our preferences are real, and educational psychologists aren't really arguing about that. Where the controversy lies is that there really isn't good, solid evidence to support the idea that catering instruction to people's learning styles or learning preferences really helps them learn. There have been some very well-designed, carefully controlled experimental studies where they tested the learning styles, the reported learning styles of the participants, and then they had one group where the lesson was geared toward their learning style and another group where it wasn't. And they tried to measure statistically whether people in one group performed better, learned better, performed better on a test than the other. And in these kinds of studies, they failed to show any significant effects of tailoring a lesson to the person's learning style. And a bigger problem with the idea of learning styles is that there are so many other considerations that are really important when you're deciding how to present material. The nature of the subject matter is a big one. Think about geography. If someone's trying to learn how to read maps, but they say they're not a visual learner, does that mean that the teacher should translate the maps into words for them? Or does it mean that they should stretch and improve their skill and get better at reading maps, get better at dealing with that visual information? Now, the learning styles theory would say if you're not a visual learner, then the teacher should find a way to make map reading more accessible in some manner other than visually. But really, the nature of the subject matter is very important in deciding how to best present a lesson. Also, prior knowledge of learners has been shown to affect what kinds of techniques and presentations work best. Sometimes advanced learners need a different type of presentation than novice learners, regardless of what their preferences are. And then, of course, we're all individuals, and we don't all fall neatly into three buckets. We're all different, and teachers really need to try to be adaptive to their students as individuals and not as three categories. So Cofield et al. Did a very extensive review of the literature on learning styles and came to the conclusion, shown in this quote, "Decisions about the forms in which meaning is represented are probably best made with all learners and the nature of the subject matter in mind, rather than trying to devise methods to suit vaguely expressed individual preferences." So I've talked about how the cone of retention is a myth and the visual auditory kinesthetic learning styles theory is highly controversial. So you might be thinking, where does that leave us? Does that leave us just with students sitting in neat rows in their desks with their hands folded while the teacher talks? Well, not necessarily, because there are research and theory-based principles for teaching and learning that address some of the same issues that the learning styles theories and the cone of retention sought to address, but do so in a more evidence-based manner. So, just as one example, I'm going to highlight Richard Mayer's cognitive theory of multimedia learning. And what this theory did was propose some research-based guidelines for optimal use of pictures, audio, and text, particularly in computer-based instructional materials, to help people learn. And according to Mayer, these guidelines are done to satisfy our practical goal of developing principles for multimedia design based on theory-based research rather than the intuitions of designers, which, as we've seen, are not always correct. So here are some examples. Mayer now has, it's up to 8 or 9 principles, I believe, possibly more, because people keep working on developing this theory. But here's just an example of some of the principles from this theory. There's the multimedia effect, which says that better transfer, which means better ability to apply what you've learned in one lesson to another situation that's different. So better transfer occurs when a message contains words and pictures rather than words alone. So there's some evidence showing that both words and images matter. And then the coherence effect says that there's better transfer when irrelevant words, pictures, and sounds are excluded rather than included. So sometimes just cute, fun graphics end up being added to web pages or PowerPoint slides just because people think that it's going to make people laugh, it's going to make them happy, they'll learn better. But actually, Mayer's research has shown that those things are distracting, and that it's better if all of the multimedia, the words, the pictures, the sounds, everything is very coherent and supports the lesson. There's the modality effect. Better transfer occurs from animation and narration than from animation and on-screen text. So if you're watching an animation, it's better if you're listening to the words than having to read them at the same time that you're looking at the animation. And the redundancy effect. Better transfer occurs from animation and narration than from animation, narration, and on-screen text. Again, that last one with animation, narration, and on-screen text, it's a lot of stuff to keep track of. It overloads your memory. So it's better to just have you looking at the animation and listening to the narration. And now, these were proven in very controlled experiments and with a particular type of lesson and a particular type of learning. So it's not necessarily true that these principles apply equally well in all situations out there in the real world. But nevertheless, these very controlled experiments gave some good, solid evidence that these effects occur under certain circumstances. So I've highlighted Mayer's theory as an example, but actually there are many very good reasons to use a variety of media, a variety of methods, a variety of activities to help students learn. I don't want you to go away thinking that Dr. Penny Thompson says teachers should just lecture. That is not the message here at all. There are very, very good reasons to use multimedia, to use different activities, to use different methods, different approaches. But the Dale's cone of retention, which is not Dale's and is not the cone of retention, is not one of those reasons. And the learning styles theory is probably not one of those reasons either. There are better reasons. So the takeaway message here is, as a student and as a teacher, you should always ask, where is the evidence? The references shown in this list will give you more information about all of the topics that I talked about in this lesson.